This 4-year-old beggar girl is kicked out of school by a teacher who says, "You scare the students." But the millionaire owner of the school saw everything and does something that shocks everyone. Watch until the end to find out what happens. Comment what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important. And subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The morning sun painted the dusty streets of Harmony Creek, a small town in rural Pennsylvania, when Iris walked barefoot toward Harmony Creek Elementary. Her 4 years carried a weight that shouldn't exist in someone so small. The torn and dirty clothes contrasted cruelly with the spotless uniforms of the other students who passed her without so much as a glance. Iris had discovered a secret that she guarded like a treasure. Hidden behind the large maple tree in the schoolyard, she could spy on the classes through the open window. The letters on the blackboard seemed to dance before her curious eyes, and she dreamed of one day being able to decipher those mysterious symbols that fascinated her so much. From the second floor of the main building, Mr. Bennett Alcott watched the activity in the yard with his usual attention to detail. At 67, the man had built an empire that included not only the most prestigious school in the region, but also several local businesses. His meticulous and observant personality made him unable to ignore any irregularity in his domain. That morning, something caught his attention. A small figure moved furtively among the trees, and Bennett frowned as he recognized the girl who appeared almost every day. There was something about that child that stirred him in a way he couldn't explain. Iris positioned herself in her favorite hiding place, pressing her face against the fogged window of the classroom. Mrs. Marilyn Fuller was writing on the board, and the girl followed each movement with fascination. At 45, Marilyn commanded the first-grade class with an iron fist. Known for her intolerance and rigid methods, the discovery happened during recess. Marilyn went out to inspect the yard when she noticed strange movement behind the tree. Her eyes narrowed as she realized the presence of the intruder. "You again!" Marilyn shouted, advancing toward Iris like a beast toward its prey. "How long have you been spying on my classes?" Iris tried to run, but her small legs were no match for the teacher's fury. Marilyn grabbed her arm with unnecessary force, dragging her through the yard, while other students watched the scene with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "A dirty little pest like you scares the paying students," Marilyn yelled, shaking Iris as if she were a rag doll. "This school is for decent children, not for vagrants who snoop where they aren't called." The words cut deeper than any physical wound. Iris didn't fully understand the venom behind them, but she felt the pain they carried. Tears streamed down her dirty face as she tried to break free from the cruel grip. Bennett witnessed the entire scene from his window. The way the teacher treated that defenseless child awakened something primal in his chest, a fury he hadn't felt in a long time. Without thinking twice, he ran down the stairs. "Mrs. Fuller!" His voice echoed through the yard with absolute authority. "Release that child immediately." Marilyn froze, realizing too late that she had been caught in her cruelty. She released Iris abruptly, who fell to the dusty ground, and tried to compose an expression of innocence. "Mr. Alcott, the girl was disrupting the classes, spying through the windows. I thought—" "I don't care what you thought," Bennett cut in, approaching Iris and extending his hand to help her up. "An educator who treats a child this way doesn't deserve to be in my school." Iris looked at that tall and elegant man with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. No one had ever defended her before. Her small hand trembled as she accepted the help offered. "What's your name, little one?" Bennett asked, kneeling down to be at her height. "Iris," she murmured, her voice almost inaudible. "Iris," he repeated, and for the first time in years, Bennett smiled genuinely. "A pretty name for a brave girl." Marilyn watched the interaction with increasing irritation and concern. There was something in the way her boss looked at that girl that bothered her deeply. The power she wielded over the most vulnerable students could be threatened. "Sir, the girl isn't our student. There's no way she can pay the tuition. It would be better if—" I decide who can or cannot study here," Bennett interrupted coldly. "And you, young Iris, would you like to study at our school?" Iris's eyes widened. It was as if someone had offered her the stars in the sky. She nodded vigorously, unable to form words. At that moment, Bennett made a decision that would change not only Iris's life, but the entire school. Without yet knowing the consequences of his impulsive act, he had planted the seed of a revolution that would shake the foundations of that community. "Then it's decided," he declared, ignoring Marilyn's mortified look. "Starting tomorrow, Iris will be our new student." The teacher felt the ground open up under her feet. Her authority had been questioned publicly, and even worse, because of a child she considered unworthy of setting foot in that place. As Bennett walked away with Iris, Marilyn silently vowed that she would make that girl pay dearly for her humiliation. The next morning, Carol Smith woke up before dawn to prepare the uniform that Bennett had sent over during the night. At 38, the simple woman who had raised Iris since she was a baby never imagined that her adopted daughter would set foot in such an important school. Her trembling hands smoothed the new fabric while tears of gratitude streamed down her face. "My little one, today is a very special day," Carol whispered, waking Iris with affection. "You're going to start studying for real." Iris jumped out of bed with an energy that Carol hadn't seen in months. The girl had dreamed all night about the letters that she could finally learn to decipher. She put on the uniform with reverence, as if it were a magical armor that would transform her into a true student. Meanwhile, in the Alcott mansion, Dolores paced back and forth in the living room, her indignation growing with each step. At 62, Bennett's sister had always been the voice of reason in the family business, and her brother's impulsive decision infuriated her. "Bennett has completely lost his mind," she muttered to herself, adjusting her glasses on her aquiline nose. "A street girl in our school. The parents will withdraw their children, and our reputation will be ruined." Dolores had dedicated her entire life to building the prestige of the Alcott family. As administrative director of the school, she knew every influential family in the region and knew exactly how they would react to this news. The envy she felt of the sudden affection that Bennett showed for a stranger mixed with the genuine fear of seeing the family empire crumble. At school, Marilyn arrived earlier than usual, her mind feverishly plotting ways to sabotage the new student without being discovered. She reorganized the classroom, positioning the desk intended for Iris in the darkest corner, far from the blackboard and the other children. "If she wants to study so badly, let her figure it out on her own," she muttered maliciously, hiding the school supplies that Bennett had bought for Iris. When Iris arrived at school, accompanied by Carol, who insisted on dropping her off personally, the contrast was stark. The other mothers wore expensive clothes and arrived in luxury cars, while Carol walked humbly in her simple, patched dress. "Look who's here," commented Valerie Thompson, mother of a student in the class, with poorly disguised disdain. "Old Bennett's protégé. What a shame for our school." The other mothers whispered among themselves, casting disapproving glances at Iris, who shrank more and more beside Carol. The girl perceived the hostility, even without fully understanding its origin. "Mommy, maybe it's better to go home," Iris whispered, pulling at Carol's skirt. "No, honey," Carol replied with a determination she didn't know she possessed. "You deserve to be here as much as any of these children." Bennett watched everything from his office, feeling his chest tighten as he witnessed the coldness with which they treated Iris. He hadn't cared about the opinion of others for a long time, but seeing that child suffer stirred something deep in his soul. The first class was a silent nightmare. Marilyn ignored Iris completely, asking questions only to the other students and pretending not to see when the girl timidly raised her hand. The classmates, influenced by the teacher's attitude, began to whisper among themselves, pointing at Iris as if she were a strange creature. "Why is she here?" asked Jessica, a 5-year-old blonde girl, daughter of the largest merchant in the city. My mum said she doesn't have money to study here. She must have done something wrong for the principal to feel sorry for her, replied Matthew, a chubby boy who always followed Jessica like a puppy. The words cut like razors. Iris lowered her head, pretending to write in the empty notebook, but tears began to blur her vision. Marilyn watched everything with perverse satisfaction, pleased to see that she wouldn't have to try very hard to make the girl's life miserable. During recess, the situation worsened. Iris tried to approach a group of girls who were playing Ring Around the Rosie, but they moved away, as if she had some contagious disease. My mom told me not to play with you, Jessica declared with childish cruelty. She said you might teach us bad things. Iris spent the entire recess alone, sitting under the maple tree where it had all begun. She watched the other children play and laugh, feeling more isolated than when she was outside the school. Stella Miller arrived at the school that afternoon for her first meeting with Bennett. At 29, the newly graduated educational psychologist had been hired specifically to monitor Iris's development, although she didn't yet know it. I need you to observe this child discreetly, Bennett explained, handing Stella a folder with the little information he had about Iris. Something tells me she'll need special support. Stella flipped through the meager documents, immediately noticing the gaps in the information. She was adopted very young? Apparently, yes. The adoptive mother is a simple, honest woman, but without the resources to give her everything she deserves. There was something in Bennett's voice that intrigued Stella, an emotional connection that went beyond mere charity. She decided to accept the challenge, without imagining that she was about to discover secrets that would shake the entire structure of that family. Meanwhile, Dolores was in her office meeting with 3 of the most influential mothers in the school. The meeting was no coincidence. She had orchestrated everything carefully. I perfectly understand your concerns, Dolores said with false compassion. My brother has a very generous heart, sometimes too generous. We don't want to be prejudiced, Valerie lied, but our children have standards. Mixing social classes can be problematic. Exactly, Dolores agreed. And there are issues that you can't even imagine. This child may have negative influences. The seeds of venom were being planted systematically. Dolores knew that she couldn't attack Iris directly, but she could use the mothers as her weapons, creating social pressure that would force Bennett to reconsider his decision. At the end of the first day, Iris returned home in silence. Carol tried to pry out of her how it had been, but the girl only shook her head and retreated to her small room. Lying in bed, she looked at the uniform carefully hung and wondered if she really deserved to be in that place. That night, Marilyn met secretly with Dolores in the school office. The 2 women, united by the same determination to get rid of Iris, began to plan a systematic campaign of humiliation that would test the limits of resistance of a 4-year-old child. She can't suffer physical marks, Dolores warned. My brother wouldn't forgive it. But there are other ways to break a child's spirit. Marilyn smiled coldly. Leave it to me. In 2 weeks, she'll be begging to leave this place. While the 2 conspired in the darkness, Bennett remained awake in his library, flipping through old family albums. There was something familiar in Iris's face that bothered him, a resemblance that he couldn't identify. Without knowing it yet, he was about to discover that fate had placed that child in his path, for reasons much deeper than he imagined. 2 weeks passed, like an endless nightmare for Iris. Every morning, Marilyn found new ways to humiliate her. Her notebooks disappeared mysteriously, her pencils broke by accident, and when she tried to answer questions, the teacher either ignored her completely or corrected her with unnecessary brutality. Iris, you don't even know how to hold a pencil properly, Marilyn mocked in front of the entire class. How do you expect to learn to write? Maybe it's better to go back to the street where they found you. The other children laughed cruelly, and Iris swallowed her tears, determined not to give Marilyn the satisfaction of seeing her cry. At home, Carol noticed that her daughter was increasingly quiet, catching her several times, looking sadly at her school uniform. "My flower, did something happen at school?" Carol asked gently. "No, Mommy. Everything is fine," Iris lied, not wanting to worry the woman who had sacrificed so much for her. Stella had begun her discreet observations and quickly noticed the signs of psychological abuse. During a math class, she witnessed Marilyn deliberately tear up Iris's exercise, claiming it was poorly done and dirty. "I need to talk to you urgently," Stella told Bennett at the end of that afternoon. In the principal's office, Stella reported everything she had witnessed. Bennett listened in silence, his fury growing with each word. He hadn't felt such pure anger in a long time, an outrage that made his blood boil. "She is being systematically destroyed," Stella concluded. "And the worst thing is that Iris doesn't complain. She accepts all the abuse as if she thinks she deserves it." "That stops today," Bennett declared, standing up abruptly. But before he could act, Dolores appeared at the door with 3 couples of parents, all with grave expressions. She had perfectly orchestrated that moment. "Bennett, we need to talk," Dolores announced with false solemnity. "It's about the delicate situation we've created." Dr. Anthony Peterson, a respected physician and Jessica's father, stepped forward. "Bennett, we've been friends for years. That's precisely why we came personally. Our children are being affected by this child's presence." "Affected how?" Bennett asked in a dangerously low voice. "Jessica comes home asking questions about poverty, about abandoned children," explained the doctor's wife. "We don't want her to get used to certain realities so soon." "Besides," added Valerie, "Mrs. Fuller told us that the girl has disturbing behaviors. She talks to herself, draws strange things." Stella bravely intervened. "Those are signs of trauma, not of disturbance. Any child who has experienced abandonment—" "And who are you to give your opinion?" Dolores cut in coldly. "A newly hired employee questioning families who have been building this school for generations?" The tension in the room was palpable. Bennett looked at each face, seeing not only prejudice, but also fear. Fear that their children would develop empathy, that they would question the privileges they considered natural rights. "I perfectly understand your concerns," Bennett said finally, his voice calm but loaded with a coldness that made everyone shiver. "And you are right about one thing. This situation really needs to change." Dolores smiled triumphantly, believing she had won. The parents exchanged relieved glances. But what Bennett said next left them paralyzed. "Starting tomorrow, any parent who doesn't accept Iris's presence in this school can look for another institution for their children. And Marilyn Fuller is fired." The silence that followed was deafening. Dolores paled, realizing that she had completely underestimated her brother's determination. "Bennett, you can't be serious," Dr. Peterson stammered. "We're the ones who keep this school running." "And I'm the one who owns it," Bennett replied with devastating simplicity. "The door is open. Use it whenever you want." At that moment the door opened and Iris appeared timidly, carrying her backpack. She had stayed late in the library, trying to study on her own the content that Marilyn refused to teach properly. The sight of the small and fragile girl in front of all those hostile adults created a moment of absolute discomfort. Iris immediately felt the tension, her eyes scanning the frowning faces until they landed on Bennett. "Sorry, Mr. Alcott. I didn't know you were having a meeting," she murmured, trying to retreat. "Come in, Iris," Bennett said gently. "These people were just leaving." Dr. Peterson made one last attempt. "Bennett, think carefully about what you're doing. A child isn't worth the destruction of decades of tradition." "You're right," Bennett agreed, placing his protective hand on Iris's shoulder. "A child is worth much more than that." The parents left in silence, some visibly shaken, others furious. Dolores was the last to leave, casting a look of pure hatred at Iris. "You'll still regret this, Bennett," she whispered before closing the door. Alone with Iris and Stella, Bennett knelt in front of the girl. "Iris, I want you to tell me the truth. How has Mrs. Fuller been treating you?" For a moment Iris hesitated. Then, as if a dam had broken, everything came out at once. The torn notebooks, the hidden pencils, the daily humiliations, the complete isolation. "But I don't want you to have problems because of me," she concluded with tears in her eyes. "Maybe it's better if I go back home." "Never," Bennett said firmly. "This is your school as much as any other child's, and I promise that no one will hurt you here anymore." That night, Marilyn received the dismissal letter at home. Her fury was incandescent, fueled by the public humiliation and the loss of the job she considered secure. Without thinking about the consequences, she drove to Dolores's house. "He humiliated us," Marilyn growled, pacing nervously through the luxurious room. "In front of everyone, as if we were garbage." "My brother has always been stubborn," Dolores replied, pouring herself a glass of wine. "But this time, he went too far. He's putting a street urchin above his own family." "There's something about that girl we don't know," Marilyn murmured. "No one protects a stranger like that, unless—" "Unless what?" Dolores asked, frowning. "Unless she's not a stranger," Marilyn completed, her eyes gleaming with malice. "There may be a connection we don't know about." Dolores was silent for a long moment, her mind working furiously. There was something in Marilyn's suggestion that bothered her deeply, as if a ghost from the past was whispering in her ear. "I need to check some things," she said finally. "In the meantime, I want you to stay away from the school, but don't give up yet. This war is far from over." While the two women plotted their revenge, Iris slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. Carol had noticed the change in her daughter's mood when she arrived home, saying that Mr. Alcott had taken care of everything. "Mommy, I think things will get better," Iris had whispered before falling asleep. Carol kissed her daughter's forehead, praying silently that she was right. She didn't know that, in the basement of the school's archive, Dolores was rummaging through old documents with growing desperation, looking for a truth that could destroy not only Iris, but the entire Alcott family. 3 days after Marilyn's dismissal, the atmosphere at school had changed drastically. Bennett had temporarily hired Mrs. Nancy Porter, an experienced educator of 52 years, known for her patience and dedication to children. The difference in the treatment Iris received was like coming out of the darkness into the light. "Very good, Iris. Your handwriting is improving every day," Nancy praised during the English class, showing the girl's notebook to the whole class. See how carefully she did the exercise. For the first time since entering school, Iris felt a spark of pride. The other students watched her with a mixture of curiosity and growing respect, especially after they learned that their parents had been confronted by the principal because of her. But not everything had calmed down. Jessica, still influenced by the poisonous words of her mother, continued to lead a small group of resistance against Iris. "Just because the principal likes her doesn't mean she's better than us," Jessica whispered to Matthew during recess. "My mom said she's only here out of pity." Matthew, always eager to please Jessica, nodded vigorously. "That's right. My dad said she's going to bring problems to the school." Meanwhile, in the administrative corridors, Dolores had spent the last 3 nights immersed in the old files. Her hands trembled as she flipped through dusty documents, looking for any clue that explained Bennett's sudden obsession with that girl. It was in the file of employees dismissed 5 years ago that she found what she was looking for. The name Lucinda Alvarenga Smith jumped off the page like a slap in her face. The memories she had tried to bury returned with devastating force. Lucinda, the distant cousin who had arrived in town pregnant and desperate. The girl of just 16 years that Dolores had expelled from the family with cruel words and threats, forcing her to give the child up for adoption before disappearing. "It can't be," Dolores murmured, her hands trembling as she held the birth certificate attached to the file. The child's name was there: Iris Smith, daughter of Lucinda Alvarenga Smith. The world seemed to spin around her. That girl she so wanted to expel was blood of her blood, granddaughter of her grandmother's sister, and even worse, if Bennett discovered the truth, he would know that Dolores had been responsible for separating the family and forcing a child into abandonment. Dolores burned all the documents that same night, her hands trembling as she fueled the flames in the fireplace of her house. But she knew that destroying papers would not erase the truth. She needed to act quickly before someone else made the connection. At school, Stella continued to monitor Iris's progress, impressed by how quickly the girl absorbed knowledge when treated with dignity. During a follow-up session, something caught her attention. "Iris, do you remember your real mother?" Stella asked gently. "Not much," Iris replied, focused on her drawing. "Mom, Carol said she had to give me to her when I was very little because she was very sick." "And you never knew her name?" Iris stopped drawing and looked at Stella with her big, thoughtful eyes. "Carol sometimes calls her poor Lucinda when she thinks I'm not listening." The name echoed in Stella's mind like an alarm bell. Lucinda. There was something familiar about that name, something she was sure she had heard in the hallways of the school. She decided to investigate discreetly. Meanwhile, Carol faced her own battles. The merchants in the square where she sold her sweets had begun to treat her differently after the events at the school, some with renewed respect, others with envy and resentment. "Carol, I heard your daughter has become old Bennett's darling," commented Mr. Antonio, owner of the bakery, with a tone she couldn't decipher. "Be careful not to get used to luxuries that may not last." "Iris is at school because she deserves to be there," Carol replied with dignity, "not because of anyone's favor." Sure, Mr. Antonio laughed sarcastically, "but you know how these things are. Rich people have their fantasies, but when it passes." Carol left the bakery with a heavy heart. Mr. Antonio's words echoed in her mind, awakening fears she was trying to keep buried. What if he was right? What if Bennett changed his mind? Iris would suffer even more for having tasted something she couldn't have. That afternoon, an incident changed everything. During recess, Jessica decided to escalate her campaign against Iris. She approached the girl who was playing alone with pebbles in the yard. "My mom said something interesting yesterday," Jessica said with childish malice. "She said you're not really the daughter of the woman who's raising you. She said your real mother abandoned you because she didn't want you." The words hit Iris like punches. She had grown up knowing she was adopted, but she had never thought in terms of abandonment or rejection. She had always believed the story that Carol told about a sick mother who loved her but couldn't take care of her. "That's not true," Iris whispered, tears beginning to flow. "Yes, it is," Jessica insisted, realizing that she had hit the mark. "That's why you don't have a dad either. Nobody wanted you." Matthew, some smaller boys, and even some girls who usually didn't get involved in conflicts, joined the circle that had formed around Iris. The poison planted by Marilyn and the prejudiced mothers was finally flourishing. "Abandoned girl, abandoned girl," they began to chant in chorus. Iris tried to run, but they surrounded her. The humiliation was total, public, devastating. For the first time since entering school, she broke down in tears in front of everyone. It was Stella who found her like that, curled up behind the maple tree, sobbing heart-wrenchingly. Without hesitating, the educational psychologist pushed the other children away and knelt beside Iris. "What happened, honey? Is it true that my mother abandoned me because she didn't want me?" Iris asked between sobs. "Is it true that nobody wanted me?" Stella felt fury rise in her chest. "Who told you that?" "Jessica said her mother said." At that moment, Stella made a decision that would change everything. She could no longer just stand by and watch. Iris needed to know her true story, and Stella was determined to find it. "Iris, Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you, Stella said firmly. I'm going to find out the whole truth about your family. And I promise you one thing, you are a very special and loved child. If anyone says otherwise, it's because they don't really know you. That night, Stella began her own investigation. She searched public records, spoke discreetly with long-time residents of the town, followed every lead related to the name Lucinda. What she discovered left her stunned. Lucinda Alvarenga Smith had been expelled from the town 5 years ago, pregnant and without resources. Several people remembered the young woman, describing her as sweet and hard-working, but involved in a family scandal. All the clues led to an inevitable conclusion. Iris was not just any child that Bennett had decided to help. She was family, and someone had done everything to keep that truth from ever coming to light. Stella looked at the documents scattered on her desk and knew she had discovered only the tip of an iceberg that could destroy or save that family. The question was, what to do with this information? On the other side of town, Dolores couldn't sleep, tormented by the certainty that her dark secret was about to be discovered. She had underestimated the power of the truth to remain buried forever. Stella spent the entire night tormented by the discovery. When the day dawned, she had made a decision. She needed to find Lucinda before revealing anything to Bennett. Iris's young mother deserved to know that her daughter was well and needed to have a voice in the decision about her future. Using her contacts from university, Stella began a systematic search. Hospitals, shelters, employment records, anywhere where a desperate young mother might have sought help. It was at St. Vincent Hospital, in the state capital, that she found the first real clue. Lucinda Smith? Yes, she works here in housekeeping for 4 years, the human resources supervisor informed her. Very dedicated girl, never misses. Why are you asking? Stella's heart raced. It's about a very important personal matter. Would it be possible to talk to her? Meanwhile, at school, Iris faced another difficult day, despite the efforts of Mrs. Porter. The incident the day before had marked a territory of war on the playground. Jessica had become even bolder, organizing a real boycott against Iris. Nobody plays with her, Jessica declared during recess, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had always been the center of attention. Whoever plays with the abandoned girl doesn't play with us anymore. Most of the children obeyed, leaving Iris completely isolated. She tried to concentrate on her studies, but the loneliness weighed like a stone in her chest. During gym class, when they needed to form pairs, Iris was left alone. Iris can be my partner, offered timidly a new girl named Laura, who had enrolled the week before. No way, interrupted Jessica immediately. She's got cooties, my mum said. Laura, intimidated, backed down. Iris felt the tears burn her eyes, but refused to cry again in front of everyone. Mrs. Porter intervened, but the damage was done. Bennett watched everything from his office, his concern growing. He had tried to protect Iris from the consequences of his decision, but it was becoming clear that the situation was more complex than he had imagined. He decided to take a more direct action. During lunch, Bennett appeared unexpectedly in the cafeteria. His imposing presence made all conversations cease instantly. He walked to the table where Iris was having lunch alone and sat down next to her. "Can I have lunch with you today?" he asked with a gentle smile. Iris nodded, surprised and touched by the gesture. Bennett's presence beside her sent a clear message to the entire school. He not only supported Iris, he considered her worthy of his personal company. "How are your studies?" he asked, helping himself to the same simple dish she was eating. "They're fine. Mrs. Porter is very good," Iris replied, her voice gaining confidence with the affectionate attention. Jessica watched the scene from her table, where she sat with the group of populars. Anger and envy burned in her chest. How could that dirty girl get the attention she had always considered her right? "Dad, why does the principal like her more than us?" Jessica asked upon arriving home that day. "Doctor, Peterson, still resentful for the humiliation suffered in Bennett's office, fueled the venom. "Some men get sentimental when they get old, honey. But it passes. You are much more important than any street girl." Meanwhile, Dolores was becoming increasingly desperate. The growing closeness between Bennett and Iris terrified her. If anyone made the family connection, not only would her reputation be destroyed, but she could lose everything: control over the business, her brother's trust, her position in society. She decided to look for Marilyn again. The former teacher had spent 2 weeks drinking and lamenting, but when Dolores appeared at her door with a proposal, her eyes gleamed with interest. "I need you to do something for me," Dolores said, entering the messy house. "Something that will benefit both of us." "I'm listening," Marilyn replied, trying to disguise the alcohol on her breath. "I want you to seduce my brother." The silence that followed was heavy. Marilyn looked at Dolores as if she had gone crazy. "Are you serious?" "Completely. Bennett has been a widower for 5 years, isolated, vulnerable. An interesting and available woman could easily capture his attention. And once you're close to him, I can influence him against the girl," Marilyn completed, understanding the plan. "Exactly. You recover your position, I recover my brother, and that pest gets out of our lives forever." It was a desperate plan, but Marilyn was desperate enough to try anything. In the following days, she began to find Bennett casually, at the bank, at the grocery store, at the drugstore. Always elegant, always friendly, always dramatically lamenting the misunderstanding that had caused her dismissal. Bennett, absorbed in his concerns with Iris, barely noticed Marilyn's efforts. But she was persistent and gradually began to plant seeds of doubt about the wisdom of his decision. "Bennett, you're such a generous man," she sighed during one of these casual encounters. "But sometimes I worry that your kindness is misinterpreted. People may think there are other motivations." "What kind of motivations?" he asked, distracted. "Well, an older single man developing an obsession with a specific child. You know how malicious tongues work in this town." The words were poisonous, planted with surgical precision. Bennett began to notice speculative glances, whispers that ceased when he approached. The smear campaign was working. Meanwhile, Stella finally managed to find Lucinda. The meeting took place at the end of the young woman's shift, outside the hospital. Lucinda was a small and fragile woman, only 21 years old, but looking much older due to suffering. "Lucinda Smith," Stella called, approaching nervously. "Yes, who wants to know?" "My name is Stella. I'm an educational psychologist. It's about your daughter, Iris." Lucinda paled instantly, her legs wobbling. "My daughter? Did something happen to her? Is she okay?" "She's fine, very fine. But I need to talk to you urgently." Sitting on a bench in the square near the hospital, Stella told everything. How she had found Iris, the discovery of the family connection, the situation at school. Lucinda listened in silence, tears streaming down her face. "I think about her every day," Lucinda whispered. "When I found out I was pregnant, I tried to go home, beg forgiveness. But Dolores kicked me out, said I was a disgrace to the family, that if I showed up again, she—" "She what?" Stella insisted. "Said she would make me lose the child, that she knew people who could solve the problem. I was scared, with no money, no place to go. When Iris was born, I wanted to stay with her, but I had no way to support a child. Carol offered to take care of her temporarily until I stabilized, but you never managed to stabilize enough to get her." Lucinda nodded, sobbing. "I tried so many times, but whenever I saved some money, something happened. Illness, job loss. It was as if fate didn't want me to get my daughter back." "Lucinda, do you want to see her?" "More than anything in the world. But she shouldn't even remember me. What if she's happy where she is? I have no right to destroy the life they've built for her. She has the right to know her true story," Stella said firmly. and you have the right to fight for your daughter." That night, Stella returned home with a plan. She was going to organize a meeting between mother and daughter. But first, she needed to prepare Iris. And after that, she would have to face Bennett with the truth about his family, a truth that could blow up the lives of everyone involved. At school, Iris slept peacefully in her bed, dreaming of a day when she would no longer have to have lunch alone. She didn't know that her life was about to change again, in a way more radical than any 4-year-old could imagine. The following week brought subtle but significant changes in Bennett's behavior. Marilyn's poisonous words had planted a seed of doubt that was growing silently. He began to question whether his excessive protection of Iris was causing more harm than good, not only to her, but to his own reputation. "Maybe it's better if I keep a more professional distance," he murmured to himself, watching Iris play alone on the playground during recess. Stella noticed the change immediately. Bennett had stopped visiting the classroom, cancelled the shared lunches, and seemed to avoid any close contact with Iris. The girl, sensitive as she was, noticed the distancing and interpreted it as yet another rejection. "Stella, is Mr. Alcott angry with me?" Iris asked during a follow-up session, her small voice filled with insecurity. "Why do you think that, honey? He doesn't talk to me anymore. Before he smiled when he saw me, now he looks away." Stella felt her heart clench. She knew she needed to act quickly before the situation deteriorated further. She decided to accelerate her plans for the meeting between Iris and Lucinda. "Iris, would you like to know more about your real mother?" she asked carefully. The girl's eyes widened. "Did you find out anything about her?" "I did, and she would really like to meet you." Meanwhile, Marilyn intensified her psychological attacks against Bennett. During a casual encounter at church on Sunday, she whispered venom disguised as concern. "Bennett, people are commenting about your fixation on that child. They say it's not normal for a single man to be so interested in a specific girl." "They're just malicious words from envious people," Bennett replied, but his voice didn't sound convinced. "Of course they are, but you know how this town is. Once your reputation is tarnished, your school, your business, everything can be affected." Bennett left the church disturbed. As much as he tried to ignore it, the words found an echo in his own insecurities. He began to wonder if his motivations were really pure, or if there was something more obscure in his obsessive protection of Iris. At school, Iris's situation worsened day after day. Jessica had recruited practically all the children into her army of exclusion. During art class, when Iris tried to get materials from the common table, the other children deliberately pushed everything away. "Don't touch our things," Jessica said, loud enough for Mrs. Porter to hear. "You have street germs." Mrs. Porter intervened immediately. "Jessica, apologize right now. That behavior is unacceptable." "My mom said it's true," Jessica replied brazenly. "Abandoned children have diseases." The public humiliation was devastating. Iris felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. For the first time, she began to believe that maybe she really was different, marked, unworthy of being there. That afternoon, Stella put her plan into action. She took Iris for a walk in the city park, where she had arranged to meet Lucinda. The young mother was sitting on a bench, nervous and anxious, wearing her best clothes. "Iris, there's someone very special who would like to meet you," Stella said gently. When Iris saw Lucinda, something instinctive awakened in her heart. There was an inexplicable familiarity in that face, as if she were looking into a mirror of the future. "Hi, my little one," Lucinda whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You've grown so much." "Are you my real mother?" Iris asked, her voice mixing fear and hope. "I am, my love. And I never, never abandoned you because I didn't want you. I love you more than anything in this world." The encounter was emotionally overwhelming. Lucinda told her version of the story, how she had been forced to leave, how she had struggled to return, how she thought of Iris every day. Iris listened to everything with wide eyes, finally understanding that she had not been rejected for lack of love. "Why didn't you come back for me?" Iris asked, her childlike logic trying to process the complex situation. "Because bad people prevented me," Lucinda replied, looking meaningfully at Stella. "But now I'm going to fight to stay close to you." While mother and daughter reconnected in the park, Dolores was having her own crisis. She had hired a private investigator to investigate Stella's activities, and the reports were making her increasingly paranoid. "The educational psychologist has been asking a lot of questions about the Alcott family," the investigator informed her, "specifically about a certain Lucinda Smith, and yesterday she was seen leaving St. Vincent Hospital." Dolores's blood ran cold. If Stella had found Lucinda, it was only a matter of time before the truth exploded. She needed to act drastically. That night, Dolores looked for Bennett at home. She found him in his library, apparently absorbed in reading, but she could perceive his inner turmoil. "Bennett, we need to talk about a very serious situation," she said, assuming her most serious tone. "If it's about Iris, I don't want to hear it," he replied, without lifting his eyes from the book. "It's exactly about her, and about how your reputation is being destroyed because of this obsession." Bennett finally looked at his sister. "What obsession? Let's be honest with each other. A 67-year-old man, single, developing a fixation on a 4-year-old girl? How do you think that looks to people? I'm just trying to help a child in need. Bennett, you've lost objectivity. You're spending a fortune on this girl, changing school policies for her, confronting important families. This is not rational behavior." Dolores's words echoed the doubts that Marilyn had planted. Bennett felt a painful confusion take over his mind. "Besides," Dolores continued, moving in for the final blow, "I discovered something about that Stella you hired. She's doing investigations about our family, asking questions, looking for people from the past." "What kind of investigations?" "I don't know exactly, but it seems to have to do with some old family scandal. Maybe she's a journalist in disguise, trying to find dirt for a sensationalist report." The paranoia planted by Dolores began to bear fruit. Bennett remembered some strange questions that Stella had asked. Her insistence on knowing Iris's story, how she had appeared in his life just when he needed help most. "Do you think she's using Iris to manipulate me?" "I think you should be much more careful about who you let into your life," Dolores replied, feigning fraternal concern. "And maybe it's time to reconsider this whole situation before it's too late." That night, Bennett couldn't sleep. For the first time since meeting Iris, he began to question his own motivations. Could he be being manipulated? Was his compassion being used against him? Meanwhile, Iris slept for the first time in weeks with a smile on her face. She had found her real mother, discovered that she was loved, understood that she was not alone in the world. She didn't know that a few miles away, the people she loved most were being poisoned against her by a woman desperate to protect her dark secrets. The storm Dolores had avoided for so long was finally approaching, and she would do anything to avoid being hit by it, even if it meant destroying the life of an innocent child and the very brother she claimed to love. The final confrontation began on a Tuesday morning when Bennett called Stella into his office with an expression she had never seen before. Distrust was etched on every line of his face, and the tense atmosphere made Stella realize immediately that something had drastically changed. "I need you to explain a few things to me," Bennett said, his voice cold and distant. "I've heard you've been doing investigations into my family." Stella felt her heart leap into her throat. "Mr. Alcott, I can explain. I hope you can, because I've discovered that you've been seeking out people from my past, asking questions about family members that even I haven't mentioned. That's not part of a school psychologist's job." "I discovered something important about Iris," Stella tried, but Bennett interrupted her with a sharp gesture. "Discovered or invented? Because I'm starting to suspect that your presence here isn't a coincidence." Maybe you're a journalist or someone trying to take advantage of me through a child." The accusation was like a slap in Stella's face. "How can you think that? Everything I've done has been to try and help Iris." Help or use? Because an interesting thing happened yesterday. Iris came home talking about meeting her real mommy. Curious how this mommy appeared just now, don't you think? Stella realized she had been discovered, but also understood that Bennett was being manipulated. "Mr. Alcott, please let me explain everything. The truth is much more complex than—" "The truth is that you abused my trust." He cut her off, rising from his chair. "You're fired. I want you to remove your belongings today and not approach Iris again." "You can't do this." "Iris needs me. Iris needs stability, not someone who keeps stirring up wounds from the past for their own purposes." Stella left the office devastated, realizing that she had lost not only her job, but also the chance to protect Iris from the storm that was approaching. Dolores had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. That same day, something even worse happened. During recess, Jessica decided to escalate her campaign of humiliation to a cruel new level. She had overheard her mother commenting with other ladies about shocking revelations involving Iris and decided to use these partial pieces of information as weapons. "Everyone, I found out something really interesting about Iris," Jessica announced to a group of curious children. "My mum said that she's not just abandoned. She's the daughter of a woman who did shameful things." "What kind of things?" asked Matthew, always eager for gossip. "Things that good girls don't do. That's why her family kicked her out when she was pregnant. Iris is the daughter of a fallen woman." The words were too harsh for children of that age to fully comprehend, but they understood enough to know that they were terrible insults. Within minutes, the whole school was whispering about Iris's shameful origin. When Iris arrived at the playground, she found a circle of children waiting for her. What followed was the most devastating humiliation of her short life. "Fallen woman's daughter! Fallen woman's daughter!" they began to chant in chorus. Iris didn't fully understand the meaning, but she felt the venom behind the words. She tried to run, but they followed her, shouting the insults until she collapsed in tears in the middle of the playground. Mrs. Porter rushed over and scattered the children with fury, but the damage was done. Iris was inconsolable, not only because of the humiliation, but because of the confusion over what those words meant about her newly found mother. "What were they saying about my mommy?" She sobbed in her teacher's arms. Nancy didn't know what to answer. How could she explain to a 4-year-old the complexities and prejudices of the adult world? How could she protect her from truths that she didn't yet have the maturity to understand? The incident reached Bennett's ears, who for the first time in days felt his instinctive protection for Iris outweigh his doubts. But when he tried to console her, he discovered that the girl had changed. "Why does everyone hate me?" Iris asked, looking at him with eyes that had lost their innocence. "Why can't I have a normal family like the other kids?" "You do have a family," Bennett tried. "You have Carol, I have a mother who did shameful things, and a father I don't even know," Iris interrupted, with a bitterness shocking for her age. "And I have people who pretend to like me, but then abandon me when they find out the truth." The last sentence was a stab in Bennett's heart. Iris had noticed his distancing and interpreted it as just another rejection. He realized too late that he had been manipulated into hurting the very person he wanted to protect. That afternoon, Carol was called to the school to pick up Iris, who was in a state of shock after the incident. When she saw her daughter, normally resilient, completely broken, the simple woman felt a fury she didn't know she possessed. "What did you do to my girl?" she asked Bennett, her voice trembling with emotion. "There was a misunderstanding between the children," he tried to explain, but Carol interrupted him. "Misunderstanding? Look at her. She's destroyed. And you, who promised to protect her, where were you?" "Carol, I don't want to hear excuses. I'm taking Iris home, and I don't know if she'll be back tomorrow. Maybe you were right from the beginning. This school is no place for her." Iris's departure that day had a weight of finality that frightened Bennett. For the first time, he faced the real possibility of losing her forever. And he realized that in his doubts and hesitations, he had become part of the problem instead of the solution. That night, Dolores celebrated her partial victory. Stella had been fired, Bennett was confused and distant from Iris, and the girl herself was so traumatized that she might give up on school on her own. But her celebration was interrupted by a call from the private investigator. "Mrs. Alcott, I've discovered something you need to know urgently," said the tense voice on the other end of the line. "That Lucinda Smith. She didn't disappear after you kicked her out of town." "What do you mean?" "She came back several times over the years, trying to get her daughter back. And there are records that she sought legal help if she's kept documents, evidence of what happened 5 years ago." Dolores felt the world spin around her. If Lucinda had proof of how she was threatened and expelled, if there were records of attempts to recover her daughter, the whole castle of lies she had built would collapse. "There's more," continued the detective. "The school psychologist hasn't given up. She's planning something. They were seen together today, Lucinda and her talking for hours." Panic took hold of Dolores. Stella and Lucinda together meant that the truth was about to explode. She needed to act quickly before she completely lost control of the situation. But this time, it wouldn't be enough to just manipulate Bennett or sabotage Iris. She would need to take more drastic measures, and if that meant destroying some lives in the process, so be it. After all, she had survived protecting the family's secrets for decades, and she wasn't about to let a 4-year-old stop her now. Meanwhile, in her simple home, Iris was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and trying to understand why the world seemed so cruel to her. She didn't know that her biological mother and Stella were plotting a plan to reveal the whole truth, nor that her own existence was about to shake the foundations of one of the most powerful families in Harmony Creek. The final storm was approaching, and everyone involved would have to choose their sides before it was too late. 3 days had passed since Iris had left school, and Carol's house seemed plunged into a deep sadness. The girl, who used to wake up excited to study, now spent hours sitting by the window, staring into nothing. She didn't talk about school, didn't ask about books, didn't draw her colorful birds anymore. "Honey, don't you want a nice breakfast?" Carol tried, but Iris just shook her head, lost in her own thoughts. Carol felt her heart break seeing her daughter like this. The girl who had fought so hard to learn to read and write now seemed to have given up on everything. It was as if the light in her eyes had gone out completely. Meanwhile, Stella and Lucinda worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Dolores. In the small apartment that Lucinda shared with 2 co-workers, they spread out documents, letters and records that told the true story of the last 5 years. "I saved everything," Lucinda explained, showing a shoebox full of papers. "Every time I tried to come back, every conversation with lawyers, every record of attempted contact. I knew that one day I would need to prove that I never abandoned my daughter willingly." Stella examined the documents with growing outrage. There were letters from Lucinda to Dolores begging to see her daughter, records of legal consultations where lawyers explained that she didn't have the resources to fight for custody, even photos of Lucinda watching Iris from afar in parks and plazas. "This is gold," Stella said, holding up a recording on an old cell phone. "What is it?" "I managed to record a phone conversation with Dolores 2 years ago," Lucinda explained, her hands trembling. "When I tried to negotiate a supervised visit." They listened to the recording together. Dolores's voice was cold and menacing. "You signed the papers giving up custody. If you show up near this family again, I guarantee you'll never work in any hospital again. I have contacts, Lucinda. I can destroy your life." "Why didn't you ever show this to anyone?" Stella asked, horrified. "To whom?" I was a young, single mother with no money. She was Dolores Alcott, one of the most powerful people in the region. Who would believe me? But now the situation was different. Stella had contacts, credentials, knowledge of the system. And above all, she had the determination of someone who had seen an innocent child being systematically destroyed. "We're going to make Dolores pay for everything she's done," Stella promised. "And we're going to give Iris back to you." Meanwhile, at school, Bennett was facing the consequences of his decisions. Without Stella to guide him, and without Iris to motivate him, he felt lost. The school continued to function, but something essential had been lost. Mrs. Porter sought him out that morning, her expression worried. "Mr. Alcott, I need to talk about Iris. She doesn't study here anymore," he replied dryly, trying to hide his own pain. "But she should be. The other children are asking about her, especially Laura, the new girl. She said Iris was the only one who had been kind to her. Children adapt. Mr. Alcott, with all due respect, you made a terrible mistake. Iris wasn't the problem in this school. The problem was the prejudices that we allowed to flourish, and by pushing her away, you fueled exactly what you should have been fighting." Nancy's words echoed in Bennett's conscience throughout the day. He began to realize that his doubts and hesitations had been manipulated, that he had betrayed the very principles he had always defended. That afternoon, he decided to do something he hadn't done in years. He went to Carol's house in person. The simple house was in a humble neighborhood, contrasting brutally with the Alcott mansion where he lived. When Carol opened the door and saw him there, her expression hardened immediately. "What do you want here?" she asked, blocking the entrance. "I want to see Iris. I want to apologize." "Apologize?" Carol's voice was loaded with bitterness. "You promised to protect my daughter, and then you abandoned her when she needed you most. What kind of apology can fix that? I know I made a terrible mistake. I let other people confuse me, let them plant doubts about my own motivations. But the truth is that Iris, she touched me in a way I can't explain. And now, you've discovered that you miss her and want her to come back to be humiliated again? No. I want to make sure she has the best possible future, even if it means acknowledging that I made serious mistakes." Carol stared at him for a long moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. Reluctantly, she let him in. Iris was sitting on the floor of the living room, playing distractedly with some old dolls. When she saw Bennett, her face lit up for a fraction of a second before closing again. "Hi, Iris," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Hi," she replied without looking at him, continuing to play. "You know, I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry, really sorry. I promised I would protect you, and then I let you down when you needed me most." "It's okay," Iris murmured, but her voice carried a deep sadness. "I already knew it wasn't going to last. Good things never last for me." The sentence broke Bennett's heart. A 4-year-old shouldn't have that resigned perspective on life. "Iris, look at me," he asked gently. When she finally raised her eyes, he continued, "I promise you that this time it will be different. I'm going to find out the truth about everything that happened, and I'm going to make sure you're treated with the respect you deserve." "You really promise?" "I promise. And this time nothing and nobody will make me break that promise." At that moment the doorbell rang. Carol went to answer it and found Stella at the door, accompanied by a woman she didn't know, but who had something familiar in her face. "Carol, this is Lucinda," Stella said. "Iris's biological mother. We came because we discovered very important things about what really happened." Lucinda's entrance completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Iris ran into her mother's arms, and Bennett watched the scene with a mixture of emotion and confusion. "Lucinda Smith," he said slowly, as if trying to fit the pieces of a puzzle. "That name. Did you used to work for my family?" "I did, Mr. Alcott. And it was your sister who kicked me out of town when she found out I was pregnant." The silence that followed was dense. Bennett looked at Lucinda, then at Iris, and finally began to see the resemblance that had bothered him since day one. The eyes, the shape of the face, even the way she tilted her head when she thought. "Your family," he whispered, the realization hitting him like a lightning bolt. "I'm a distant cousin, yes. And Iris is your blood relative?" Lucinda confirmed. Dolores knew this from the first day, but she hid the truth from everyone. Stella opened her briefcase and began to show all the evidence they had gathered. Documents, recordings, photos, witnesses. The complete story of how Dolores had destroyed a family to protect her own reputation. Bennett listened to everything in growing silence, his fury increasing with each revelation. Not only had he been deceived about Iris, but his own sister had been responsible for years of unnecessary suffering. "Where is Dolores now?" he asked finally, his voice dangerously low. "Probably at home, planning her next move," Stella replied. "She knows we've found out everything. She's desperate." Bennett stood up, his decision made. Then it's time to end this, once and for all. But what none of them knew was that Dolores was not at home planning. She was in the office of an unscrupulous lawyer, trying to find a legal way to make Lucinda and Stella disappear permanently. And if the law didn't work, she had other methods in mind. The final battle was about to begin, and this time there would be no more room for half measures or hesitations. The confrontation between the Alcott siblings happened that same night, in the library of the family mansion where they had grown up together. Bennett arrived with the evidence organized by Stella, his contained fury like lava about to erupt. Dolores was sitting in her favorite armchair, pretending to read, but her hands trembled visibly. "I need you to explain a few things to me," Bennett said, his voice dangerously calm as he closed the door behind him. "About what?" Dolores tried, but her acting was clearly forced. "About Lucinda Smith, about how you kicked a pregnant girl out of our family 5 years ago, about how you hid from me that Iris is our relative." Dolores paled, but tried to maintain her composure. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," Bennett exploded, throwing the documents on the table. "I have everything here, recordings, letters, witnesses. You destroyed an entire family to protect your sick pride." Confronted with the evidence, Dolores abandoned the charade. She stood up from the armchair, her eyes gleaming with a coldness that Bennett had never seen before. "And I'd do it all again," she declared defiantly. "That girl brought shame to our family. She got pregnant at 16, without marriage, without a future. She was going to destroy our reputation." "Our reputation?" Bennett's voice rose an octave. "You condemned an innocent child to years of suffering because of reputation? You've always been too sentimental, Bennett. That's why you've never been truly successful in business. You don't understand that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. Decisions like threatening a young mother, like forcing her to stay away from her own daughter, like protecting what we've built for generations," Dolores shouted, completely losing control. "This family, this company, this position in society, all of this doesn't stand on its own. It requires sacrifices. Sacrifices from others, never your own," Bennett retorted bitterly. "You've never had children. You've never loved anyone but yourself. How can you judge a mother who fought to stay close to her daughter?" "Because I protected this family when you were too busy grieving for your departed wife. Because I made the tough decisions you never had the guts to make." The mention of Bennett's wife was the last straw. He moved towards his sister, but controlled himself at the last moment. "You're out of the company, out of the school, out of my life," he said with absolute coldness. "I want you to leave this house tomorrow. You can't kick me out of the house that's also mine." "I can, and I will. This property has been in my name for 15 years, and if you try to contest anything, I'll use this evidence to sue you for coercion and threats." Dolores realized that she had lost everything. In her obsession with controlling the family, she had destroyed the bonds that really mattered, but her vindictive nature would not allow a silent defeat. "You'll regret this, Bennett," she hissed. "That girl will bring disgrace to you, just like her mother did. Bad blood always reveals itself." "The only bad thing in this family is you," Bennett replied, opening the door. "Now get out of my sight." Meanwhile, in Carol's house, a very different scene was unfolding. Iris was sitting on Lucinda's lap, listening to stories about when she was a baby. For the first time in days, the girl smiled genuinely. "You used to fall asleep in my lap singing softly," Lucinda said, stroking her daughter's hair. "Even asleep, you hummed like a little bird." "Is that why I like birds so much?" Iris asked, fascinated. "Maybe. I always said you'd fly high one day." Stella watched the scene with emotion, but also with concern. She knew that Dolores would not accept defeat peacefully, and that difficult days were still to come. "Lucinda, do you have a safe place to stay for a few days?" she asked. "Why? Do you think she's going to try something? People like Dolores don't give up easily, and now she has nothing left to lose." Stella's concern proved prophetic. The next morning, Dolores didn't show up to remove her belongings from the mansion. Instead, she had disappeared during the early hours, taking only a small suitcase and leaving behind a lifetime of power and influence. Bennett received the first call at 8 in the morning. It was from the bank manager, informing him that Dolores had tried to transfer money from the company accounts during the night. "We managed to block the larger transactions," the manager explained, "but she took a considerable amount from her personal account." The second call came from the town's police chief. "Mr. Alcott, we received a serious complaint against you and Estella Miller. Someone claimed that you are holding a child captive against the family's will." "That's ridiculous." "Who made this complaint?" "They preferred to remain anonymous, but said they had evidence that the child was illegally removed from a family that wants to get her back." Bennett immediately understood Dolores's strategy. If she couldn't win through normal channels, she would use the system against him. It was the last desperate blow of someone who would not accept defeat. He rushed to Carol's house, finding Stella and Lucinda in a panic. They had also received visits from social workers, questioning Iris's legal situation. Dolores managed to convince someone that Iris is being kept away from her real family, Stella explained, furious. She completely reversed the narrative. "Where is she?" Bennett asked. "She's gone. Nobody knows where." "And Iris?" "She's at school," Carol replied. "I thought it would be safer to keep her in a normal routine while we sort this out." It was at that moment that Bennett's phone rang. It was Mrs. Porter, and her voice was filled with panic. "Mr. Alcott, you need to come to the school immediately. Iris has disappeared." "What do you mean, disappeared?" "During recess, a woman came to pick her up, said she was her aunt and that she had legal authorization. She presented documents, everything seemed official." Bennett felt his blood run cold. "What woman?" "I didn't know her, but Iris seemed to recognize her. She went with her without resisting." The realization hit everyone simultaneously. Dolores had kidnapped Iris. "She can't have gone far," Stella said, trying to stay calm. "Let's call all the hotels, inns." "No," Bennett interrupted, a sinister understanding taking over him. "I know my sister. She wouldn't run away from the city. She's hidden somewhere nearby, planning her next move." "What next move?" "Make it look like we're the villains of the story. If she can keep Iris away for a few days, she can claim that she saved her from kidnappers, that we were manipulating a child against her family." Lucinda began to cry. "My daughter! After everything we went through to be together." "We're going to find her," Bennett promised. But inside he felt a fear he hadn't experienced in years. Dolores had shown that she was capable of anything to maintain control, and now she had Iris as a hostage in her private war. Meanwhile, in an abandoned house on the outskirts of town, Iris was sitting on an old chair, looking at Dolores with growing confusion and fear. "Aunt Dolores, when are we going back? Mrs. Porter will be worried." "We're not going back any time soon," Dolores replied coldly. Your Uncle Bennett has done very bad things, and now I need to protect you from him. But he didn't do anything bad to me. Yes, he did. He and those women were trying to turn you against your real family. But don't worry, I'll take care of you now." Iris felt a chill in her stomach. There was something in Dolores's tone of voice that frightened her deeply. For the first time in her life, she began to understand that not all adults had good intentions. And as darkness fell over the town, a 4-year-old child found herself alone in the hands of a woman who had completely lost her sanity in her obsession with power. The first 24 hours after Iris's disappearance were a living nightmare. Bennett mobilized all his contacts, from employees of his companies to acquaintances in public bodies, in a desperate search for his niece. Carol couldn't stop crying, and Lucinda walked around the house like a ghost, blaming herself for having allowed her daughter to go to school on that fateful day. "She could be anywhere," Stella murmured, examining a map of the region for the 100th time. "Dolores knows this town better than anyone. She knows exactly where to hide." Bennett was on the phone, coordinating search groups, when he received a call that changed everything. It was Marilyn, and her voice was filled with nervousness. "Bennett, I heard Iris disappeared. I need to talk to you. If it's to gloat over the situation, I don't have time for that. It's not that. It's just that I know where Dolores might be." The silence that followed was tense. Bennett gestured for everyone to stop what they were doing. "What do you know?" "A few months ago, when Dolores and I collaborated, she showed me a place. An old house that belonged to your father, on the outskirts of town. She said it was the perfect hiding place for when she needed to solve family problems." "Why are you telling me this now?" Marilyn's voice trembled. "Because a 4-year-old child doesn't deserve to suffer for the sins of adults, and because maybe it's the only way for me to redeem myself for what I did." Bennett wrote down the location quickly. It was a property he had completely forgotten about, a country house that his father used for hunting decades ago. Isolated, with no close neighbors, the perfect place for someone who wanted to stay hidden. "Stella, Lucinda, come with me," he said, grabbing the car keys. "Carol, stay here in case Dolores calls." "I'm not staying," Carol declared with determination. "Iris has been my daughter for 4 years. I'm going to find her." Meanwhile, in the abandoned house, Iris was experiencing the kind of fear that would change her personality forever. Dolores had begun to show clear signs of mental instability, alternating between moments of false gentleness and explosions of fury directed against people who weren't even present. "Your mother was a tramp," Dolores murmured, walking back and forth in the dusty room. "She brought disgrace to our family, just like you're going to bring." "My mother isn't a tramp," Iris replied with the desperate courage of innocence. "She's good, and she loves me." "Lies! All lies that they put in your head," Dolores exploded, turning to the girl with wild eyes. "Bennett poisoned you against me, made you believe in false stories." Iris shrank back in the chair, realizing that she was in real danger. At 4 years old, she didn't understand the details of the situation, but her childhood instinct captured the madness in Dolores's eyes. "I want to go home," she whispered. "This is your home now. We're going to stay here until I decide what to do with you. What if I promise to be good, if I don't bother anyone anymore?" The question broke what was left of humanity in Dolores. For a moment she saw the child in front of her, scared, confused, begging for mercy. But madness soon regained control. "Too late for promises," she said coldly. "You've already caused too much damage." The rescue group arrived at the property in the late afternoon. The house stood sinister against the orange sky of the sunset, its broken windows like empty eyes watching their approach. Bennett felt a chill run down his spine. "Let's be careful," Stella warned. "We don't know what mental state she's in." They approached the house silently, hearing voices coming from inside. It was Dolores, talking to herself, her words an incoherent stream of accusations and justifications. And in the middle of everything, the small and frightened voice of Iris. "Please, Aunt Dolores, let me see Mommy Carol." "Carol isn't your mother. Nobody is your mother." "You're a cursed child, without family, without a future." Lucinda had to be held back by Stella to avoid running towards the house. Tears streamed down her face as she listened to the terror in her daughter's voice. Bennett gestured for them to stay behind and approached the front door. It was locked, but he knew that house since childhood. There was a side window that never closed properly. Inside the house, Dolores had stopped talking and was watching Iris with an expression that the girl couldn't decipher. It was a mixture of hatred and something like regret. "You know what?" Dolores said finally. "Maybe it's better if you just disappear. That way, no one else will suffer because of you." "What do you mean?" Iris asked, although part of her already knew and was terrified. "Accidents happen. Children get lost. Sometimes they are never found." It was at that moment that Bennett managed to enter through the side window. What he saw left him paralyzed with horror. Dolores was holding a rope in her hands, looking at Iris like a predator watches its prey. "Dolores," Bennett said softly, trying not to scare his sister. "What are you doing?" Dolores turned sharply, the rope still in her hands. "Bennett, how did you find me?" "That doesn't matter now. What matters is that you let Iris go and we talk." "Talk?" Dolores laughed, a humorless sound that echoed sinisterly through the empty room. "We've already talked. You chose her over your own sister." "I didn't choose anyone. I just tried to do what was right." "Right?" Dolores's voice rose to a hysterical pitch. "Destroying our family because of a bastard was right?" Iris began to cry silently, trying to become invisible in the chair. Fear had become a physical presence in her small body. "Iris didn't destroy anything," Bennett said, taking a cautious step towards the two. "You destroyed it. With your prejudices, your pride, your sick need to control everything. I protected our family. You destroyed our family, and now you're trying to hurt an innocent child to hide your own mistakes." It was at that moment that Lucinda appeared at the door, having managed to get in through the front. When she saw her daughter tied to a chair and Dolores with a rope in her hands, she completely lost control. "Get your hands off my daughter!" she screamed, advancing without thinking about the consequences. Dolores turned to face this new threat, and in that moment of distraction, Bennett managed to reach Iris. He quickly untied the girl and pushed her towards the door. "Run, Iris! Go to Mommy Carol!" The girl didn't need any more encouragement. She ran towards the door, where Carol was waiting for her with open arms. The relief of being safe again was so intense that she burst into sobs in her adoptive mother's lap. Inside the house, the final confrontation between the siblings was just beginning. Dolores, realizing that she had lost her last card, completely collapsed. "You destroyed everything!" she screamed at Bennett. "Our family, our reputation, our future. All because of a child who isn't even ours." "She's more our family than you ever were," Bennett replied, his voice laden with a deep sadness. "Family isn't about blood, Dolores. It's about love, protection, sacrifice, things you never understood." For a moment, Dolores seemed to break completely. She fell to her knees on the dusty floor, the rope slipping from her hands. But when she raised her eyes again, there was a dark acceptance in them. "Then so be it," she whispered. "If I can't have my family, nobody can." What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone involved. Dolores stood up abruptly and ran towards the broken window, apparently trying to escape. But in her haste and altered mental state, she stumbled on the debris of glass and wood. The sound of her body hitting the ground outside the house echoed like a definitive end to all that madness. When they went out to check, they found Dolores unconscious on the ground, a wound on her head bleeding profusely. Stella immediately checked her vital signs, while Bennett called for medical assistance. "She's alive," Stella said, "but she needs urgent care." While they waited for the ambulance, Iris remained hugged to Carol, trembling not from cold, but from the trauma of those terrible hours. Lucinda knelt beside them, completing the circle of protection around the girl who had suffered more than any child should suffer. "It's over," Bennett murmured, more to himself than to the others. "It's finally over." But as he looked at his unconscious sister being taken away by the ambulance, he knew that the scars of that day would remain forever, especially on the people he loved most. The 3 months that followed Iris's rescue were a period of slow and painful healing. The girl had developed constant nightmares, waking up in the middle of the night screaming and looking for Carol. During the day, she avoided being alone in any room and was startled by any sudden sound. "It's normal," explained Dr. Robert Silver, the child psychologist that Bennett had hired especially to take care of Iris. "She went through a severe trauma. Recovery will take time, patience, and a lot of love." Carol rarely left her daughter's side, sleeping in the same bed when the nightmares became unbearable. Lucinda had moved to a small house near them, visiting every day and helping with the care. The closeness between the two women who loved Iris had turned into a solid and loving partnership. "Mommy Carol, why are people mean?" Iris asked one afternoon while drawing at the kitchen table. Her drawings had changed drastically. They were no longer colorful birds flying free, but black birds trapped in cages. "Not all people are mean, honey," Carol replied, sitting next to her. "Aunt Dolores was very sick in her head. That made her do bad things." "And will she get better?" Carol hesitated before answering. Dolores had survived the accident, but the doctors had discovered that she suffered from a serious psychiatric disorder that had developed over the years. She was hospitalized in a specialized clinic under constant medical care. "The doctors are trying to help her," she said finally. "But the important thing is that you're safe now." Bennett had become a constant presence in Iris's life, but in a different way. He had learned to respect the girl's trauma, approaching slowly, letting her control the pace of the approach. His visits were regular, but never invasive. "Uncle Bennett, do you think one day I'll be able to not be afraid anymore?" Iris asked during one of his visits. "I'm absolutely sure," he replied, kneeling down to be at her height. "You're the bravest kid I know, and you have so many people who love you and will help you." School had become a complex problem. Although Bennett wanted Iris to return to her studies, the girl categorically refused to enter the building. The association with the day of the kidnapping had created a psychological barrier that seemed insurmountable. "Maybe it's better to wait a little longer," suggested Stella, who had resumed her work as Iris's school psychologist. "Forcing the situation could worsen the trauma." It was then that Lucinda had an idea that would change everything. "What if we created a different school for her?" she suggested during a family meeting at Carol's house. "It doesn't have to be anything formal. Just a few children, in a safe environment with people she trusts." "Where?" Bennett asked, interested in the proposal. "In your mansion. There's enough space, and Iris already feels safe there." The idea began to take shape quickly. Bennett converted one of the rooms in the mansion into a small classroom, equipped with everything small children would need. Stella took on the role of lead teacher, and they recruited some children whose parents were open to different educational experiences. "But I want Laura to come too," Iris said when she heard about the plan. "She was the only child who tried to be my friend in the big school." Laura, the shy girl who had offered to be Iris's partner on the day of the final humiliation, was the first student invited. Her mother, a sensitive woman who had felt bad for not having defended Iris before, accepted immediately. "It's a second chance for all of us," she told Stella. Gradually, other families joined the project. Not many, just 5 children in total, including Iris. It was a small, intimate group where each child received individualized attention. The first day of Uncle Bennett's school, as Iris had christened it, was exciting and terrifying at the same time. Iris woke up with a stomachache, too nervous to eat. "What if the other kids don't like me?" she asked Carol. "Impossible not to like you," Carol replied, fixing her daughter's hair. "You're special, honey." But when Iris arrived at the mansion and found Laura waiting for her with a drawing as a gift, a colourful bird flying free, something magical happened. For the first time in months, she smiled genuinely. "I made this drawing thinking about you," Laura said shyly. "Because you're brave, like a bird that flies high." Tears came to the eyes of all the adults present. It was the first real sign that Iris was beginning to find her way back to the light. The small school functioned as collective therapy. The children learned not only math and English, but also about friendship, compassion, and acceptance of differences. Iris flourished in that protected environment, where she could be a child without fear of judgment. "Stella, look what I drew today," Iris said one afternoon, proudly showing her work. It was a bluebird coming out of an open cage, flying towards the sun. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. What does it mean?" "It means I'm learning to fly again." Bennett, watching from afar, felt his heart fill with a joy he hadn't experienced in years. Seeing Iris regain her confidence and joy of living was the greatest reward he could imagine. But recovery was not linear. There were difficult days, relapses, moments when the trauma seemed stronger than the progress. During a particularly strong storm, Iris had a panic attack so severe that they had to call Dr. Robert Silver for an emergency session. "The sound of the rain reminds me of the ugly house where Aunt Dolores took me," she cried, trembling in Carol's arms. "I'm afraid she'll come back." "Dolores won't come back," Lucinda promised, holding her daughter's hand. "And even if she did, now you have an army of people who protect you." It was true. Over the months, a network of protection had formed around Iris. Carol and Lucinda as her mothers, Bennett as the protective uncle, Stella as a mentor and friend, Dr. Robert as a guide in emotional healing, and even Marilyn, who had completely redeemed herself, helping with the children at the small school as a volunteer. "You know what?" Iris said one night before going to sleep. "I think I'm very lucky." "Why, honey?" Carol asked, surprised by the statement. "Because I have two mothers, an uncle who loves me, real friends, and a special teacher. Some kids don't even have one of those things." The wisdom of the 5-year-old child, she had her birthday during the recovery, touched Carol deeply. Iris had found a way to transform her pain into gratitude, her scars into strength. In the 6th month after the rescue, Dr. Robert Silver gave the most positive report to date. "Iris still carries the trauma, and probably will carry it throughout her life in some way," he explained to the family gathered. "But she has developed healthy coping mechanisms. She has a solid support network. She is academically at the appropriate level for her age. And above all, she has regained her ability to trust and love." "Does that mean she's cured?" Bennett asked. "It means she's on the right track. Complete healing is a process that can take years, but she has all the necessary tools to live a full and happy life." That night, while the whole family celebrated Iris's progress, the girl herself was in her room, working on a secret project. It was a book of drawings that she was making about her story. The first page showed a sad and lonely girl. The middle pages were dark, full of threatening figures and trapped birds. But the last pages were completely different, colorful, full of sunshine, with birds flying free and a large family holding hands. On the last page, she had written with her childish, still shaky handwriting, "Everyone deserves a family that loves them." It was more than a drawing. It was the philosophy of life of a child who had survived the worst of human nature and found the best of it on the journey back home. A year had passed since Iris's rescue, and the family's life had found a new and harmonious rhythm. The small school at Bennett's mansion had become a model for the region, attracting the attention of educators from other cities who wanted to learn about the innovative project. 15 children now, Stella commented proudly, watching the expanded classroom functioning at full steam. And a waiting list of parents who want to enroll their children. Iris, now 5.5 years old, had become one of the natural leaders of the group. Her experience with suffering had made her extraordinarily empathetic with children who were shy or scared. "You don't have to be afraid," she told Peter, a 4-year-old boy who was crying on his first day. "Everyone is good here. And teacher Stella makes cookies for snack time." Bennett watched these interactions with growing admiration. The girl he had protected by instinct was now protecting others, creating a virtuous circle of care and compassion. But it was during a pedagogical meeting that an extraordinary discovery completely changed the perspective on Iris's future. "Bennett, I need to talk to you about something important," Stella said, asking to speak in private after observing Iris during the week's classes. "Is it about her behavior? I've noticed she's been quieter lately." "It's not behavior. It's hard to explain. Iris has a mathematical ability that goes far beyond her age." Stella showed Bennett a series of exercises that Iris had solved spontaneously. Problems that would normally be presented to children of 8 or 9 years old, she solved intuitively, as if it were a game. "Yesterday she asked me why 7 times 8 gave the same result as 8 times 7, Stella continued. "When I explained the concept of the commutative property, she immediately applied it to multiplications with larger numbers, on her own. Does that mean she's gifted in math, possibly an exceptional talent? She needs adequate stimulation, or she'll start to get bored and regress." The discovery brought joy and concern in equal measure. Bennett was proud, but also anxious about how to handle this new responsibility. "What should we do?" he asked. "First, let's confirm with appropriate tests. Then, we'll need to adapt the teaching for her. And maybe it's time to consider bigger opportunities." That night, Bennett spoke with Carol and Lucinda about the discovery. The two women reacted with a mixture of amazement and maternal concern. "My little girl has always been bright," Carol said with pride. "But this changes everything, doesn't it?" "It doesn't change what's most important," Lucinda replied. "She's still our Iris, our daughter. It just means she needs special care to develop her potential." When they told Iris about the tests they would do to confirm her abilities, she reacted with the curiosity typical of a child. "Am I going to be a special, different child now?" she asked. "You've always been special," Bennett said. "Now we've just discovered another wonderful thing about you. Can I still play with my friends?" "Always," Carol promised. "Being smart doesn't mean you stop being a child." The tests confirmed what Stella had suspected. Iris possessed an exceptional IQ in the logical mathematical area, placing her in the highest percentile for her age. The educational psychologist who conducted the assessment was impressed. "In 40 years of my career, I have rarely seen a child with such a natural ability for numerical patterns," explained Dr. Robert Silver. "She not only solves complex problems, she sees mathematical relationships that adults take years to understand." The news spread quickly through Harmony Creek. Local newspapers wanted to do reports on the child genius of Harmony Creek. Universities offered special programs. Education companies tried to contact Bennett to sponsor Iris's development. "I don't want her to become a spectacle," Bennett said firmly to all those interested. "Iris is a child who has been through enough trauma. I won't expose her to unnecessary pressures." But one specific opportunity made the whole family stop and reflect. The Pennsylvania State University had created a pilot program for gifted children, offering specialized education without separating the children from their families. "It would only be twice a week," explained the program coordinator during a visit. Iris would continue with her regular education, but she would have challenges appropriate for her level of cognitive development. "And where would that be?" asked Lucinda. "In State College. It would be necessary to travel, but we would organize everything so that it would be the least disruptive possible. The decision was not easy. Iris was stable, happy, integrated into her small school. Changes could destabilize the balance that had taken so long to achieve. "Let's ask her," Carol suggested finally. "Iris has already made too many difficult choices in her life. This one needs to be hers." When they explained the opportunity to Iris, she listened to everything with attention, too serious for a 5-year-old child. "Can I think about it a little?" she asked. "Of course you can. There's no rush." Iris spent 3 days considering the proposal. She talked to Laura, her best friend, who encouraged her. "You're very smart, Iris. You should use that to help other people." She talked to Stella, who explained that learning could open doors to help many children in the future. She even talked to Marilyn, who had become an additional mother figure in her life. "I'm afraid to leave here," Iris confessed to Bennett one afternoon. "What if people there don't like me? What if it's like the big school?" "Fear is normal," Bennett replied, "but this time you're not alone. You have a whole family that loves you and will be with you every step of the way. Do you promise that if I don't like it, I can come back?" "I promise, and I promise that no one will ever force you to do anything that makes you unhappy again." It was then that Iris made her decision. "I want to try, but I want Mommy Carol to come with me for the first few days." "Of course I will," Carol said immediately. "Wherever you go, I'll go with you." The preparation for this new phase brought the family even closer together. Bennett organized everything so that Carol could take time off from her work when necessary. Lucinda adjusted her hours at the hospital to be present whenever Iris returned from state college. Stella created a study plan that would connect regular learning with special challenges. On the eve of the first trip, Iris was nervous but determined. She had prepared a small bag with her favorite drawings and the teddy bear that Bennett had given her when she was still recovering from the trauma. "You know what else makes me happy?" she said to the whole family gathered in the living room. "What, honey?" Carol asked. "That now when I leave the house, I know I'll come back, and I know you'll be here waiting for me." The simple statement summed up the entire journey they had traveled together. From an abandoned and traumatized child, Iris had become a confident, loved girl with a bright future ahead. "We'll always be here," Bennett promised. "This is your home. We are your family, and nothing in the world will change that." That night, while Iris slept peacefully in her bed, the family talked about how life had changed since that fateful day when a little girl was found spying on classes behind a tree. "Who would have thought that such a terrible situation would result in so much happiness?" commented Lucinda. "Iris has taught us that even in the worst circumstances, love can flourish," replied Stella. "And that family isn't about blood or conventions," added Carol. "It's about choosing to love and be loved." Bennett looked at these extraordinary women who had become his extended family and knew that regardless of the challenges the future brought, they would face everything together. Outside, the town of Harmony Creek slept peacefully, unaware that in a simple house and an elegant mansion, an unconventional family had just proven that true love can overcome any obstacle and transform any tragedy into hope. 2 years had passed since Iris began participating in the special program in State College, and the results exceeded all expectations. At 7 years old, she already mastered mathematical concepts that impressed even university professors. But the most important thing was that she remained a happy, balanced child, deeply connected with her family. "Mommy Carol, I discovered something amazing today," said Iris, running into the house after another day in the program. "Numbers have secret patterns, like songs that only some can hear." Carol smiled, watching her daughter's eyes shine with enthusiasm. Even without fully understanding the concepts Iris explored, she perfectly understood the joy of discovery stamped on the girl's face. "Tell me about it," Carol said, sitting down to listen to another of Iris's excited explanations about theorems and equations. Lucinda had moved to a house on the same street, creating a physical proximity that reflected the emotional proximity she had developed with Carol. The two women had become more than co-mothers to Iris. They were true friends, sisters of choice. "You know what impresses me the most," said Lucinda one afternoon, as they watched Iris play in the backyard with the other children from the small school. "How she can be a genius in math and still play with dolls like any girl her age." "It's because we never allowed her to be just one thing," Carol replied. "She's smart, but she's also a child. She's special, but she's also normal. She's our daughter." Bennett had become more than an uncle to Iris. He was a father figure in the deepest sense of the term. His dedication to her education went beyond duty or guilt. It was pure and unconditional love. "Uncle Bennett, when I grow up, can I work with you?" Iris asked during a Sunday lunch at the Alcott mansion. "You can work wherever you want," he replied. "With your intelligence, the whole world will be open to you. But I want to stay close to the family. I want to use what I know to help children like I was before." The response deeply touched everyone present. Iris had found her purpose not in escaping her past, but in transforming it into strength to help others. It was during this period of stability that an unexpected letter arrived for Bennett. It was from a private psychiatric clinic in Philadelphia, informing him about Dolores. "My sister wants to see me," he said to Stella, who continued to be the pedagogical coordinator of the small school and family advisor. "They say she's better. Do you want to see her?" "I don't know. Part of me feels like I should, that maybe she's really sorry. But another part is afraid of what it could mean for Iris." "Why don't you talk to her? Iris is old enough to participate in this decision." When Bennett mentioned the letter to Iris, he expected fear, anxiety, maybe nightmares returning. But the girl's reaction completely surprised him. "Is Aunt Dolores really better?" she asked with genuine curiosity. "The doctors think so. She's taking medicines that help her mind work better." "Does she still hate me?" "I don't know, Iris. But I know she was very sick when she did those bad things. Sick people sometimes do things they wouldn't do if they were well." Iris thought for a moment, her precocious mind processing complex concepts about forgiveness, mental illness, and second chances. "I think you should go see her," she said finally. "But I don't want to go with you. I'm still a little scared." "It's perfectly normal to be scared," Bennett assured her. "And you don't have to see her if you don't want to." Never. 3 weeks later, Bennett traveled to Philadelphia. The clinic was a quiet place, with well-kept gardens and an atmosphere of healing. Dolores was waiting for him in a small but cozy room, her appearance dramatically different. She had lost weight, her hair was grey, and there was a softness in her eyes that Bennett hadn't seen in decades. But the most impressive thing was the absence of the rigidity and coldness that had always characterized her. "Bennett," she said when he entered, her voice trembling slightly, "thank you for coming." They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything that had happened hanging between them. "The doctors helped me understand many things," Dolores finally began, "about the illness I had for years without knowing it, about how it distorted my thoughts and made me do terrible things." "Dolores, let me speak, please. I need to say this." She took a deep breath. "I destroyed Lucinda's life out of pride. I tried to destroy Iris's life out of fear. And I almost destroyed you, my own brother, out of unhealthy jealousy." "You were sick," said Bennett, surprising himself with his own capacity for compassion. "Being sick explains, but it doesn't excuse. I made choices, Bennett, cruel choices that hurt innocent people, especially a child who had nothing to do with my problems." Dolores talked about the months of intensive therapy, about how the medication had cleared her mind, allowing her to see for the first time the magnitude of her actions. "Is Iris okay?" she asked hesitantly. "She's more than okay. She's flourishing. She's a bright, happy child surrounded by love. Thank God, and not thanks to me." Dolores paused, struggling with her next words. "Bennett, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but do you think that one day when she's ready, she could forgive me?" "I don't know," Bennett honestly replied. "But I know that Iris has a bigger heart than any child should have. If one day she chooses to forgive you, it will be her decision." "I don't want to see her," Dolores said quickly. "I don't want to scare her or bring back bad memories. I just want her to know that there's a person in the world who is deeply sorry for the harm she did to her." When Bennett returned to Harmony Creek, he told the family everything. The reaction was varied. Carol maintained a protective caution. Lucinda demonstrated understandable anger, but Stella surprised everyone. "I think it's important for Iris to know that people can change," she said. "Not that she needs to forgive or forget, but to know that even those who have done wrong can regret it and try to become better." Iris listened to everything carefully, asking intelligent questions about mental illness, regret, and forgiveness. "Does she still want to hurt me?" she asked finally. "No," Bennett replied with certainty. "She wants you to be happy, and she's very, very sorry." "Then I think it's okay," Iris said simply. "I don't have to like her, but I can stop being afraid." It was a response of impressive wisdom for a 7-year-old child. Iris had found a middle ground between forgiveness and self-protection, between compassion and self-care. That night, the family gathered for dinner at the Alcott mansion, as they did every week. It was a ritual that had established itself naturally. Carol, Lucinda, Iris, Bennett, Stella, and even Marilyn, who had become an inseparable part of the group. "Do you know what I discovered today?" Iris said during dessert. "What, honey?" Carol asked. "That our family is like a perfect mathematical equation. Each person is important, and if you take someone out, the result changes completely." "And what is the result of our equation?" Bennett asked, smiling. "Love," Iris replied without hesitation. "The result is always love." Later, when Iris was sleeping, the adults talked about how surreal it was, that something as terrible as what had happened could result in so much happiness. "I think Iris has taught us the greatest lesson of all," said Lucinda. "That it doesn't matter how a story begins. What matters is how we choose to continue it." "And that family isn't about perfection," added Carol. "It's about love, support, and choosing to stay together through hardships." Bennett looked at these extraordinary women who had become his extended family and knew that regardless of what the future brought, they had created something precious and lasting. In the next room, Iris slept peacefully, dreaming of numbers that danced like birds in the sky, knowing that she had a family that loved her unconditionally and a bright future ahead. The girl who had once hidden behind a tree to spy on classes now slept safe in the certainty that she deserved all the education and love that the world could offer. 5 years had passed since that first day when Iris was found hiding behind the crepe myrtle tree. Now, at 9 years old, she was about to graduate from the small school she had helped create and was preparing to enter a special high school program for gifted students. The graduation ceremony would take place in the garden of the Alcott mansion, transformed into a small celebratory arena. 15 children were graduating that day, but everyone knew that Iris was special, not only for her exceptional intelligence, but for her story of overcoming adversity, which had inspired the entire community. "Mommy, Carol, do you think my first mom would be proud of me?" Iris asked, as Carol adjusted her graduation dress. "Your first mom," Carol repeated, intrigued by the choice of words. "The one who carried me in her belly. I don't know her name, but I sometimes wonder if she would be happy to know how I grew up." Carol felt her eyes fill with tears. Throughout all these years, she had wondered if Iris would ever question the woman who gave birth to her, but she never expected such a mature and angst-free approach. "I'm sure she would be more proud than you can imagine," Carol replied. "You've become a wonderful person. Do you think she knows I exist?" I don't know, honey. But if she did, she would see that her daughter is a bright, kind, and much-loved girl. Lucinda entered the room at that moment, carrying the bouquet of flowers that Iris would carry in the ceremony. "Ready for the big day?" "Mommy Lucinda," said Iris, using the affectionate term she had created to differentiate her two mothers. "Can I ask you a question?" "Of course you can." "Do you regret giving me to Mommy Carol when I was a baby?" Lucinda knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "Iris, it was the hardest decision of my life, but also the rightest. Carol gave you what I couldn't give you at that time: stability, unconditional love, and the chance to grow up safe. But now you both take care of me together. Because we've learned that love doesn't diminish when it's divided. It grows." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. It was Bennett, elegantly dressed for the ceremony, but visibly nervous. "Iris, there's someone here who would like to meet you. But only if you want to." "Who is it?" "A journalist from Harrisburg. She heard about your story and wants to write about children who overcame difficulties and became examples of success." Iris considered it for a moment. "Will she tell about Aunt Dolores?" "Only if you allow it, and only the parts that you feel comfortable sharing." "Okay. But I want Mommy Carol and Mommy Lucinda to stay with me." The interview took place in the library of the Alcott Mansion, with Iris demonstrating impressive maturity for someone so young. When the journalist asked about the most difficult moments, Iris chose her words carefully. "I went through bad things when I was little," she said, "but I learned that bad things don't define who we are. What defines us is how we choose to grow after them." "And what would you say to other children who are going through difficulties?" "That there is always hope, that there are good people in the world willing to help, and that being different isn't a bad thing. It can be something very special." When asked about her future plans, Iris surprised everyone. "I want to study mathematics and psychology. I want to create programs to help children who have experienced trauma discover their talents, because everyone has something special. They just sometimes need help finding it." The graduation ceremony began at dusk, with the garden illuminated by small lights suspended between the trees. Parents, family members, and guests gathered to celebrate not only the end of an educational cycle, but the consolidation of a project that had changed lives. Stella, as pedagogical coordinator, gave the opening speech. This school was born from the love of a family for a special child, but it grew because we discovered that when we educate with love, patience, and respect for differences, all children flourish. One by one, the 15 children received their certificates. When it was Iris's turn, the silence in the garden was reverential. She walked to the makeshift stage with the dignity of someone much older. "Iris Santos Alcott," Bennett announced with pride, using the full name she had chosen to adopt, honoring all her families. But instead of simply receiving the certificate and returning to her seat, Iris asked to speak. "When I was little," she began, her clear voice echoing through the silent garden, "I thought I didn't deserve to be in a school. I thought I was too different, that I didn't belong anywhere." Many of those present felt tears in their eyes, remembering the frightened girl who hid behind the trees. "But this school taught me that being different can be a gift. It taught me that family isn't just who has the same blood as you, but who chooses to love you every day. And it taught me that when we have a talent, our responsibility is to use it to help others." She paused, looking at Carol, Lucinda, Bennett, Stella, and even Marilyn, who was in the audience with tears streaming down her face. "I had a family of one person when I arrived here," Iris continued. "Now I have a family of many people, and I want to use everything I've learned so that other children can also find their families and their talents." The ovation was long and emotional. When it finally ceased, Iris added one last sentence that would be etched in the memory of all those present. "Everyone deserves to be loved. Everyone deserves to have chances. Everyone deserves to live their own happy story." After the ceremony, during the party that followed, a final surprise awaited the family. An unknown man approached Bennett, introducing himself as Dr. Charles Mendez, director of an educational research institute. Mr. Alcott, I have been following your work for 2 years through academic reports. We would like to propose something revolutionary. What kind of proposal? To transform this school into a national model. With governmental support and adequate resources, you could replicate this methodology in other cities. Iris could be our ambassador, showing that trauma and overcoming adversity can coexist with educational excellence. Bennett looked at Iris, who had listened to the conversation with genuine interest. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it would be amazing," she replied without hesitation. "But only if our family stays together, and only if other children really benefit." That night, after all the guests had left and Iris had fallen asleep exhausted but radiant, the extended family gathered on the porch of the mansion to reflect on the journey they had traveled. "Can anyone believe where we've gotten?" asked Carol, watching the stars. "Sometimes it seems like a dream," replied Lucinda. "An abandoned child became a child prodigy. A destroyed family became an extended family. A trauma became a transformative force." "What impresses me the most," said Bennett, "is how Iris never lost her capacity to love and trust, even after everything she went through." "Children are more resilient than we imagine," observed Stella. "When they have adequate love and support, they can overcome any obstacle." "And we have also been transformed," added Marilyn, who had found a new way of living in redemption. "Iris didn't just change her own life, she changed all of ours." 6 months later, the small school in Harmony Creek had become Project Iris, a national initiative for educating children in vulnerable situations and early identification of special talents. Iris, now 10 years old, divided her time between her advanced studies and her role as a young ambassador for the project. "Do you have any regrets?" asked a journalist during a national interview. "None," Iris replied with conviction. "Even the bad parts of my story were important because they taught me to value the good parts, and they gave me a purpose, to help other children find their own happy stories." At that moment, watching her daughter speak with wisdom and compassion to millions of viewers, Carol knew that the girl she had found crying and frightened had become exactly what she always had the potential to be, a transformative force in the world. The crepe myrtle tree where it all began was still there in the courtyard of the original school, now transformed into a living memorial. A plaque read simply, "Here began the story of Iris, proof that every end can be a new beginning." And every day children from all over the city came to play in the shade of that tree, knowing that there had been born not only a school, but the certainty that every dream, no matter how impossible it seems, can become a reality when it finds true love.